Welcome to a new episode of Making Risk Flow. This is actually the first episode of the third season. And to celebrate it, I'm joined by two incredible change makers from Allianz Commercial Lines, Jason Howes, who's the UK business lead, and Jonathon Gray, the transformation business owner. So let's first start with brief introductions from your side. If both you and Jason and Jonathon can give me a couple of minutes of overview of your background.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick off, Jonathan, and hand over to you. So hi, Juan. Good to see you, as always. Jason Howes, I'm the Director of Business Transformation, and I've been in role now for sort of 2.5 years, overseeing the UK commercial programme of transformation in the UK for Allianz. It's obviously got an extremely tight coupling to the global strategy, which we'll, I'm sure, touch on as we get into the questions. So obviously I have a huge role to play in terms of joining up the global and the local strategy together. So that's my my background.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and hi, Juan. I suppose firstly, just thanks for inviting Jason and I along to the podcast today. So I'm Jonathon Gray, and I'm a business owner in our transformation division. But my background's actually all in underwriting. So I've probably spent the last 10 years or so on the fleet side of our business, working through from assistant underwriter up to managing one of our local accounts. And I think it's fair to say, I've seen it from both sides, both from the front end, from underwriting, trading, negotiating with our local brokers and clients, through to head office, managing accounts and steering the portfolio. But I made the decision a couple of years ago to jump into transformation and join Jason, looking at, the processes we're likely to look at in the future as underwriters, some of the tools, which has kind of led me onto the role I've got now. So over the last 12 months, I've actually been leading the implementation of Cytora across our mid-corporate product line here in the UK. So whilst transformation is completely new for me, I'd like to think my background in underwriting puts me in a decent place to try and bring a positive change into transformation.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jason and Jonathon. So both of you are, as you said, very focused on transformation. So perhaps we start with, what does the end state look like? Well, what's the vision of the transformation initiative? So perhaps start with you, Jason. How will the Allianz UK commercial lines look different after this transformation?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the overall ambition is one that's been sort of stated many times, particularly by Simon McGinn, our commercial CEO, which is to be the number one UK commercial insurer, and that's I think very clear, and it has been talked about in many forums, and that basically means to be the best by customers and brokers as well, just to be absolutely crystal clear. I mean, there's obviously then a number of lenses that falls into in terms of how we achieve that. What I would say is that transformation is an absolutely critical part of it. So transformation for the UK commercial business has been looked at for many years, and of course the business has been developing over that time, obviously incrementally as the market moves around us. I think what we've all seen in the last, well, certainly post the pandemic, is a huge digital shift at massive speed across many industries, right? So this is, if you forget insurance for just a second, one, we've seen the industries really have to change direction, digitalize at a pace that probably has never been seen before. And insurance is no different to that. And Allianz is, obviously a huge component of the insurance industry that needs to keep pace with those developments. And so transformation is a crucial part of the strategy and the target state of where we need to get to in our commercial business to be number one. And I referenced earlier in the introductions, the background is that if you look at the Allianz SE board strategy around the global business, you will notice that, Oliver, the global CEO, talks a lot about the Allianz customer model, so ACM, and then how that translates into our IT global systems. And the UK is right at the forefront of what is happening with that global technology push. Obviously, being such a mature insurance market, that's why it makes sense to really stay close to the group. And that's exactly where we're going. And I think that this will be a real key enabler to help us achieve our ambition of being number one.
And when you say, so you said number one in commercial insurance, both from a broker and a customer perspective, what does it mean to be the number one from a, like, perhaps we take those two in turn. Like, what does it mean to be the number one from a broker perspective?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, service has got to be up there as the key prime driver, right, along with efficiency. And you can put the customer and broker lenses around both of these, right? So, I mean, brokers quite rightly demand service, and that service to improve and to digitalize as they digitalize their business and as they modernize their business. And we not only have to keep pace with that, but also, innovate and improve our offering to market. Because if we do want to be number one, then, we're up against some really, really stiff competition. Our competitors are not standing still. We know that. There's lots of investment in the market, in insurtechs, and that continues at real pace. And, particularly London is a huge hub, as we've seen in the news recently, for, the insurtech and for investment as well, which is coming from many different places. So, broker service is a huge, huge focus for us. And how do we improve that? Utilizing, of course, our branch network, which is one of our unique selling points, has been with us for many years. That has to develop and has been keeping pace with changes as it's gone. But, we need to continue to evolve and move at pace. I think the efficiency point is an interesting one, because I think that if we're inefficient, then we therefore can't provide our brokers with the service that they want. And so, our strive for efficiency does come from both, making sure that we've got a handle on our expense base, because again, that makes us more competitive in the market, and that's beneficial for everyone. But also, we need to be efficient for our brokers and our customers. I think long gone are the days where it was acceptable to, sit on an email or a fax, for those that remember faxes, that could go on for days and sometimes weeks on end. People expect, quite rightly now, a much more instantaneous answer. And we have to provide the ability for that to happen. And that's the efficiency drive, right? So we've seen things like offshoring, was very, very sort of front of mind over the last few years. But the digitalization, which we've seen, as I've mentioned already elsewhere, is now at the forefront of all our thinking, as far as the industry is concerned, and Allianz.
Fantastic. And perhaps let's touch on that perhaps later in the podcast, which is what's your vision of that excellent service to your brokers, right? And then, like, how do you define great service to brokers? But perhaps before we get there, perhaps the question for you, Jonathon. So Jason has described, like, some of the goals and priorities of the transformation initiative. Can you give us an overview of how you've structured the transformation initiative? What are the areas of focus or the work streams within it?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, like you say, Jason's kind of touched upon transformation there. And I think it's fair to say the insurance industry previously probably hasn't been the quickest to shift, especially when you look at some of the other sectors out there. And obviously, from a transformation point of view, we've seen the change happen in personal lines, and it won't be too long before commercial, catches up, and most insurers will have been through their transformation programs. And I suppose at Allianz, it's no different. As Jason talked about, we predominantly trade with our brokers. So underwriters are spending a lot of time linking in with our brokers, extracting information from presentations, going off and finding as much data as possible to help them make a decision. And essentially what it means is there's a lot of back and forth between ourselves and underwriters before you can make a final decision. You throw that on top of all of the legacy systems that we've accrued over the decades, and actually you can quite see how the speed to market potentially isn't as quick as it could be. And I think, if I touch upon Jason's vision, and ultimately what it boils down to is we want underwriters spending as much time adding value in the right places as possible. So if I look at the initiative that I'm currently involved in, essentially what we're trying to do is, deliver triaged and data enriched risk submissions through to our underwriters as quickly as possible in a decision-ready format. So underwriters can essentially build upon their technical excellence to really drive through that speed to market, whilst also adding to the data insight. And I suppose, if I look at it, there'll be a number of tools and processes we'll use, and yourselves included. But what it boils down to is it's taking that unstructured data from broker submissions, taking some of the manual effort away, and then going off and enriching that and bringing a more informed view to the client and our brokers to the forefront of an underwriter's mind, so that they can essentially spend more time on the right cases that are going to add value to our bottom line.
Yeah, that makes sense, Jonathon. So Good. So you've touched on a couple of things there, right? So one is the number of manual activities underwriters have to do, and then its implication from a broker service perspective. So can you give us an overview of what did it used to look like before you started digitizing, kind of that period that happened between you received a submission and kind of a quote went out to a broker, and perhaps give us an overview of what's going to look like in the future?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and okay, it's probably quite difficult to touch upon every role and task that an underwriter takes out, but an inbox would land in, an email would land in an inbox rather. An underwriter would spend time, even just doing an initial sense check around, what I've been sent something that I want to write. Spending time copying and pasting data from one place to the other, getting it into our right systems, whether that be, a policy admin system, a workflow, a rating tool, you name it, a number of different systems to help them make a decision. So actually a long time is spent on that manual effort. So, in the future, or future world, do I envisage a situation whereby, a risk will flow into our business? That data is already being captured for an underwriter. It's then triaged based on maybe product, maybe to the right underwriting department, maybe to the right location, before being prioritized, so that actually an underwriter can really focus on driving a change through and the relationship with brokers rather than spending time on manual activities, getting data from one place to the other. If we can do that automatically, then it can only be a good thing for our customers and our brokers.
Yeah, definitely. And Jason, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no. Well, I was just going to add to what John was saying here, which is that the key point here is to get our people in front of our brokers more of the time. So actually, they're not sat in front of a computer screen, with nowhere to go because they've got so much administration to look at and to get through. That's not value add for the broker. It's not value add for us. It's not value add for the customer, right? So this is all about really focusing people's time. It comes back to the efficiency point I said earlier. Efficiency can mean so many different things, but actually our big focus is to get our people in front of all of our broker partners more, in a more effective way, more of the time, because that's what we believe that they want and what they're telling us they want to happen. So when we talk about modernizing and we talk about digitalizing, this is to really enable that to happen, right?
Exactly. So is then the vision, how do you remove all those manual activities from underwriters? Then if speed of service is a consideration, then is the vision you want to get those decision-ready risks to your underwriters within a certain amount of time, so that the first thing they can do is talk to the broker about different cases? Is that how you're thinking about it?
John, do you want to take this, or do you want me to come in? Yeah, so I can pick that up. Essentially, it is, and I think if I look at the target state of an underwriter, I think the data that'll be provided to us in the future actually allows us to get to know our clients better. I'm not saying we don't know our clients now, but if you think about it, an underwriter deals with hundreds of risk submissions, and all of that data and all the view they've got of a client is essentially presented to us by the broker. So they're led by the information that a broker submitted. I'm not saying that in the future, we'll have more data on our clients than our brokers today. I think we'd probably get shot at suggesting that by our brokers. But actually what it does is it allows us to really understand the client's needs and wants. It allows us to understand our exposures, and it allows us to talk to brokers on a level that we know their clients, and helps make a decision much, much quicker. And I think if I look at it from an underwriting side of things, you need to have a certain mindset as an underwriter to adapt to that new data coming in, and also adapt to that pace of change. Is it unrealistic to think that same day underwriting is an unrealistic expectation? I don't think so. The changing demands of our clients, the changing demands of our brokers, just in a modern world. You see it in everyday life, don't you? With your bank, any interaction with Amazon or whoever it may be, everything's instantaneous, and I can't see why that would be any different in the insurance industry. So I think from an underwriting point of view, you need that mindset, you need that skill base. But I think the other thing that, just because I found it interesting based on an example a couple of weeks ago, but you need that trust in the data that's being presented to you. Because we rolled out a new system with some new data, first thing the underwriter said to us is, where's this data come from? Who's validated it? Is it relevant for my client? And actually, there's just a level of skepticism there with any new system or data that we throw at underwriters. And I think, if I just build upon that point a little bit, I think a good underwriter would go off and spend a lot of time today, in today's world, finding out as much information as possible about a client, for all the different sources. But actually, they then obviously use their judgment to analyze that risk and underwrite it. But if you give the same risk to 5 different underwriters, you may well get 5 slightly different answers. So if we can move to a world of a data-driven workflow, which obviously speeds up our speed to market, you also drive through a level of consistency from a risk selection point of view. So, certainly when you look at things on a portfolio basis, that's surely a good thing. I suppose in answer to your question, or just to summarize, underwriters need to adapt to the pace. They need to handle new data insights, but it will really drive through, value add for our customers and clients, and allow our underwriters to spend time where they're most needed.
Okay, so bringing all that together, which is really interesting. So if you talked about same day underwriting, right? So if you think about the submission coming in from a broker, how are you thinking about, let's imagine it arrives at 8 a.m. You want to send out the quote out by 6 p.m., let's say, right? You're thinking, is the digital component, how do you present the case with all the information in front of the underwriter within the first 30, 60 minutes? And then the rest of the day is to potentially have that engagement with the broker, analyze the information the underwriter has received, etc. Is that almost like just to try to get to the level of, okay, the underwriter gets all the information up front and then has a few hours to analyze the case themselves? Is that how you're thinking?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. I think it's difficult, and you've got to be careful around just, throwing loads of risks at an underwriter within 30 minutes of it coming. Underwriters won't be able to cope. And I think it's key that you prioritize and help an underwriter as much as possible. So, one thing we focus on here is making sure that we do an element of prioritization. So when it lands in an underwriter's workflow, they've got a good sense around, what's a good risk? Is it a trade we like? Is it a broker we do well with? What kind of locations it's based in? So I think it would be very unfair of us just to throw hundreds of cases at our underwriters very quickly. You've got to give them the tools and the ability to take those prioritized risks, further add their knowledge, and then be able to trade on the front foot, and use their experience really to make sure that the business is brought home.
Yeah, and just if I could add something on this, is that if you think back 5 years, 10 years, the data that was available, even on us as individuals and personal individuals, was nowhere near as sophisticated as that availability is today, right? So again, take it away from insurance a sec. You log into your PC at home and you go onto Amazon and you get a personal shopping experience. The same on Netflix. Your Netflix account is personalized to you, and the reality is that data is driving that thought process, right? So, and this is where the insurance industry has really got to move, and it has in personal lines, as John said earlier. But commercial lines has to, starting with the SME world, which we've seen more recently as that has digitalized even further. But people expect that you will have access to a certain level of data, and it's there, right? This is not new data everywhere. It's about how you take that data, structure it, and do something with it that's both efficient and helpful to the customer and broker, right? And so a good example of this one to bring this to life is, I ran the Midlands and Southwest region for a number of years for Allianz, and if I could have written down every day somebody said to me, Jason, you ask too many questions of which are available to you on the internet, on Google in minutes. Why do you come back with so many questions? And this is something you need to address, right? And so our partnership with you guys, because we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that, but our partnership with Cytora is very much built on this approach, which is the enablement to structure data, to get access to data, to pull data from different sources much more quickly than we do today, is really exciting, right? It's a great development from the insurance industry when we know it's happening elsewhere. And if you don't embrace this change and what's coming, then simply you get left behind. It's sort of not a choice, if that makes sense. And that's one of the reasons, again, we've got a new chief data officer in Chris Varley, who many people will know. And the investment in this area and this space has to be a critical part of any transformation program for any business, really, in the world we live today.
Yeah, definitely. And if I bring together both of your points, which I think actually they are very related, I believe, to each other. I think, Jonathon, you were talking about one of the ultimate objectives being able to prioritize and help the underwriter select which one is the most attractive risk the underwriter should be working on, and which we call workflow optimization, right? It's like, how do you optimize the workflow on the day of your underwriters? And I think where data comes into play is you can only do that and identify which one is a higher priority to risk than another one if you can analyze the risk in its totality. And to do that, as you said, Jason, you cannot just rely on the data the broker has provided. Often you need to go to a number of different sources to be able to pull that information from elsewhere. So almost those are the data is an enabler to be able to start optimizing the workflow, right? And I think, because often when we talk about digitization, it feels generic, it feels like efficiency only. And I think this is where really the two things get combined, which is pulling data about the risk. Often part of that data is external data, part of it is extracted data from the submissions, that then enables you to optimize your frontline operating model.
Yes. Yeah. And Juan, you touch on, again, a really interesting area, which is, OCR technology and extraction of data from documents. Again, if you look at the advancements in the technology that's occurred both, globally and here in the UK over recent years, that continues to move at real significant pace. And again, if you put on a very positive, mindset around this, that helps people to actually take away the manual exercise of sitting and trawling through sometimes tens of pages of documents, right? Which is what used to happen a few years ago. That you don't need to do that anymore, because this technology helps underwriters and other areas of our business, right? It's not just the underwriters. It can help, inform pricing. It can help inform, obviously, data, structured data area that we talked about earlier, but also our head office teams as well. Many head office functions within Allianz, really, are enriching their data all the time now. It's great to see that technology and that basis of which you can do things is moving so quickly. And that's why we're investing in things like Cytora and the partnership with you guys to sort of make this happen.
Definitely. And it's been quite mind-blowing how, as you said, extraction technology has evolved in the last 3 to 4 years. And again, linking this back to the broker service, etc. Because to some extent, you historically, you guys and every other insurer often did this through a offshore team somewhere. Right, which so then it becomes more, is extraction an efficiency play? And I think we've discussed this in the past, but the link is, unless you can automatically extract, you cannot deliver on the service turnaround that you want for your brokers, right? Because you want that extraction to happen within minutes, so that your underwriters can see the case within whatever, half an hour, an hour of receiving the submission. Right, and I think that is when extraction becomes less of an efficiency play and more of another enabler to be able to have an optimized model that delivers kind of the desired quote turnaround. Definitely, and one of the points I believe, I would love to hear both of your perspectives, but you touched on it earlier, Jonathon, was about the skepticism of underwriters, and this type of transformation is as much as a technical one as a change management behavioral one. So how have you dealt with that, and what type of measures are you taking to ensure underwriter adoption?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's probably an obvious point, but engagement is just continuous. But I'll probably focus more around on the implementation side, just because it's where I spent most of my time recently. And I think if you take it back to, we talked earlier about the current work state of underwriters, dealing with legacy systems, in some instances, green screens that haven't been updated for some time. So actually, when you start off by trying to sell a vision, what's in it for an underwriter, how it's going to change their world, actually, to a certain extent, it's quite an easy sell. That said, how many times have we sat there, a new tool's coming along or a new process, and it feels like, oh, we've been here before, and there is that level of skepticism. So one thing we did, and if I reflect back, I think it's something we did probably quite well, was have underwriters engaged very early on in the process, have them involved in designing and building out of all the requirements, but not just any underwriter, underwriter who's one, got the knowledge, but also got a decent standing in their market and their office. Because what that actually means is, whilst they'll keep their colleagues updated of all the progress they're doing and what they're working on, which naturally just creates a little, a bit of a buzz and a bit of excitement. But it also means, that the office is almost rooting for them already and willing them on. So by the time we come along as a project team to, roll it out, do the training, further the engagement, an element of that skepticism has gone away, and you can start focusing really on the feedback and trying to drive through, how we're going to change. And I think, that's something that I think we did do very well, and it has led to, a little bit of momentum. So, and I think the key thing is making sure you have an effective feedback loop. So, it's an obvious point again, but communication. I mean, we were on site in most of our offices and regions and on a weekly basis, holding virtual town halls, conferences, you name it. But it's having that feedback loop so that the underwriters feel that they're heard and they're being listened to.
Yeah.
One's just,
John.
One's just
the lights have gone off, right?
Yeah. We can just edit this. Sorry, I was getting like super dark.
I did take that one.
We can see you again now.
Very good.
Where do we want to pick it up from?
So I think that was perfect, Jonathon. And you talked about engagement and the feedback loop with the underwriters. Can you tell us some stories, or like in reality, how has it worked? Like tell us some stories of what has been the feedback from the front line.
Yeah, of course. And I think, I'd summarize it as, it has been a positive change. If I go back to that, that targets, that current state an underwriter goes through. And I think, if I sit here and reflect, I haven't had any underwriters come to me. Maybe they just haven't, but I've had no underwriters come to me and say, what on earth are you doing? Why have you implemented this change? This is making my life a lot worse, which is great. And if one example really stands out to mind, and it's probably just because it happened in the first week or so, I think, of when we went live. And, an underwriter saw a prioritized risk in their workflow queue, got a pretty high score, opened it up, looked at the data, liked what they saw, put the pricing on it. And I think they put a price out to market in less than 24 hours. And 24 hours later, that risk was on cover. So from it landing in an underwriter's inbox through to, an underwriter looking at it, assessing it, putting a price on it, discussing with the broker then going off and discussing with the client was less than 48 hours. And, we spoke to the broker afterwards, and the broker was like, had you not been reactive, you would not have picked up this risk. You weren't forefront of mind for it. And the underwriter, whether he should or not, admitted to us afterwards as well, he'd never have looked at it because it wasn't a client name he recognized. It wasn't a broker we did a lot of work with previously. So he probably wouldn't have looked at that. And it just goes to show that actually, if you can digitize the workflow, get information to underwriters quickly and help with that prioritization, it can lead to a positive change. And, certainly we have seen other examples like that come through, but that's the one that really sticks out, just purely because it happened within a couple of days of us going live. And yeah, perfect timing in terms of generating that momentum and that buzz. Because obviously other underwriters, we'd been on site obviously the week before, so everyone was aware of what was happening. It generated that buzz and excitement amongst the rest of the region. And that, that positive news story traveled around the rest of our business, especially as we started to train and roll out into other areas. So it just helped the communications and overall led to what I'd say was a relatively smooth implementation process, but it's very early days.
And I think that those success stories are so important early on. One, to gain adoption, but I think more importantly, to show impact right away, right? So that there's impact delivered and value captured from the day of go live. So you've talked almost like the example you've described is almost a perfect story of what you described as underwriting or sending out a quote within the day of receiving the submission. So Jason, at the very beginning, you talked about broker service. Is that a good representation of how would you see great broker service in the future? As you receive a submission, gets prioritized, if it's a good one, gets underwritten, bound the next day? Is that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a few other areas to it as well, Juan. So, I mean, we touched on broker service and speed of underwriting, which is what, you and Jonathon have just been talking through there. I think, it improves relationships as well, because, you're able to have more time, first of all, which then enables more fruitful discussions to occur. We strongly believe that. And just generally, they're much more proactive discussions. And you know what it's like, right? Instead of going back and asking 20 questions, if you're going back to actually say, I've got an indicative price on this that we can talk through, then the experience is just better. It just feels better, and it's a much more nicer interaction. So it helps relationships. I think, it also makes us more competitive, and allows us to be more flexible on cover, which is probably an area we haven't talked about so far. And this is the data enablement piece again, Juan, that we're talking about here, right? That links to the broker service, because, what people wouldn't see, straight away up front, but, we're obviously taking this data and we want to do things with it, right? So it's important, you take it, you use it, you learn from it, you understand it better. And that understanding then enables us as an insurer to, what we hope will create a competitive edge, right? And now that takes some time. That doesn't happen overnight, that element of it, but it is definitely a key reason why, again, we wanted to invest in some more of this transformational technology to help that through. But one final point, which is really, really important, is claim service as well, as part of this, because, it's really powerful to have the data. It's really powerful to have got the data and to interact with our brokers at the front end as well. But don't forget that data is then available for our claims team as well. And, and that's a key component of any insurance company. But, Allianz, that moment of truth, as we all call it, when a client has a claim, there's nothing, again, more frustrating. So if we just move to that customer lens for a second, and I've been there, right, on a personal lines policy, when you get 1,000 questions that you've already told people at the front end, and there's no joined up experience for everybody, that actually is a huge enablement and makes that experience feel a lot better than it can be when it goes wrong. So this is a key component as well, right? Getting that data to flow right across the value chain, into sort of the claims world as well. And I think that claims experience is then the one that people, particularly our customers, remember.
Yeah, and that is definitely the moment of truth. And can you say more about when you said more flexibility of the cover? So how does better data or more data enable that?
Yeah, so if I just talk about the industry for a second, okay. So the industry, as and Allianz included, as for a long time, had really sort of set parameters of products, right? Whether on the SME digital side, I guess it's pretty understood and known that you have a package contract for a retailer or an office, etc. But in the commercial world, in the flow business, as we call it, or mid-corp world that we would all know, what we found is that actually there's opportunities to take the products and to really tailor and be a lot more specific to client needs, okay? But you can only do that with data, and you can only do that with the ability to have much more informed discussions, okay? So instead of actually, vanilla offerings, which, the whole market has sort of lived with for many, many, many years, what we're seeing is the industry shift to a lot more sort of focus around, products specific to customer needs, right? And that's, again, this is a huge Allianz sort of focus area where, we want to give our brokers and our customers actually not covers that they're not interested in, or not useful for a client, but covers that actually really help them. So and actually, if we can talk more proactively about that, because we understand the client needs linked to their sector, etc., we think that that's a big step forward. So that's our thinking around sort of this modularization approach that is occurring across the industry. But you can't move to that approach unless you have data and structured data to actually help you do that.
Okay, so it is more about identifying exactly what covers a client needs. It's less about personalizing the wording, because that is something that has been a nightmare in the past, having like thousands of different wordings. But it's more about, okay, what components of the policy a specific client actually needs, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. I mean, ultimately, right, we all get a policy wording, and a policy wording has to be the bedrock in which the contract is formed upon. But there is much better ways, and again, feedback from lots and lots of broker research we've done and client research is that actually the broker wordings, the client wordings that they receive from an insurer is actually quite difficult to work your way around if you're not an insurance expert, and that's something that's been close to our hearts to try and tackle and talk about and actually try and solve. And it's also a regulatory focus area of the FCA and others. So it's quite an interesting development, again, as far as the industry is concerned, but also where Allianz is focusing for the future as well.
Yeah, okay, that makes total sense. So bringing all this together, we've talked about efficiency, the experience of the underwriter, broker service, the better relationship with brokers, becoming more competitive. So as you're thinking about the business case for the full transformation initiative, like what are the main levers of value?
Yeah, so do you want me to start, Jonathan, or do you want to kick off?
I mean, I can jump in, I suppose, if I think about more the initiative I'm involved in, and feel free, Jason, to come in more from a transformation angle. But I think like any insurer, we want to write more business more profitably. Obviously quite difficult to do in a very competitive market with all the uncertainty that goes on. But I think if I just focus in on two areas, probably around like the growth and the efficiency side, if we can, if we're using digital workflows and digital extraction to basically speed up the time it takes to get all of the data in the right place to our underwriters in a prioritized fashion, in theory, we should be able to drive through our speed to market. The idea being, obviously, if we're improving our customer service with our clients and our brokers, in theory, we should write more business. And it also helps us get it right first time, and everything else. Also, Jason's alluded to it there around the data, but structured data opens up new opportunities. We'll start to compile more data on our clients, our risks, our brokers. So actually in the future, there's no reason why we might start identifying new growth opportunities. And that's obviously something that we'll start to work towards. And then lastly, before, I'll let Jason come in, but, the efficiency point, we talked about quite a bit around the manual activity underwriters go through. There's a lot of time wasted. There's a lot of manual effort, just getting data to the right part of our business, but also risks to the right part of our business. A lot of time is spent deciding, should it be mid-corp? Should it be digital? Who in the business has the best relationship? If you can really quicken that up through digital technologies, actually you're just going to become more efficient as a business, which also then plays back into the speed to market. And it's almost like a circle, isn't it? The more efficient you become, you feed it back in, and the more business you write. But Jason, I don't know if you wanted to pick up anything further from a transformation angle.
Yeah, just that I'd echo what you've said, and the fact that then kicks into better pricing, better profitability, all of the areas that any insurance company would have a huge focus on, Juan, right? So we wouldn't be new as far as that's concerned, but this is where we believe the digitalization space provides so many opportunities. And I just always come back to this point, and me and Jonathan have probably bored you to death on this already, but the data opportunities that exist from tie-ups like the one we have with yourselves really drives a different future, and I can't stress that enough. And so you'll see Simon and Chris Varley, myself, and the other directors of Allianz all talking about the investment in this space, whether it be underwriting data, whether it be data science, data AI, etc. Because if we get this right, I think as an industry, but also as Allianz as an insurer, then there's no question that it'll be an exciting area for us all to benefit from as we move forward.
Fantastic. Yeah. So lots of opportunities, right? So you talked about growth, efficiency. On Jonathon, on efficiency, you mentioned this point about routing to the right place first time, which is we hadn't touched on that, but I think it's something that is a nightmare in most insurers, right? Where you receive a submission and then it's unclear who should deal with it, and if you follow the life of the submission, typically bounces from one underwriter to another until it finds its home, etc. So that's fantastic. I think, Jason, you mentioned pricing, profitability, and just once you capture data from the whole full submission flow, that opens up opportunities to understand, like, where do you want to expand appetite, where do you have a pricing challenge to remain competitive in the market, right? So I think it's all about how do you digitize risk so that you can optimize your workflow, as we discussed earlier, and then use that data to continuously optimize the performance of the whole business, right? So you have a full data loop across those. It's been a very, very interesting conversation. Before we wrap up, I would love to ask you just one fun question, which is which I often ask to some of my guests. So if you could go out for dinner with somebody in the insurance industry and I had probably a discussion about insurance, who would you pick?
I mean, I probably should say my wife, because unfortunately she's in the insurance industry, and I've spent quite a lot of late nights recently, but on the project, so I probably owe her one. But I think if I was going to think about it seriously, and whilst I don't have a name at the forefront of my mind, it probably would senior manager or founder of some of the insurtechs or challenger insurers out there. I alluded to my career at the start, but I've predominantly been in a composite insurer, so it'd just be great to go out for dinner with some of those senior leaders, just to pick their brains, see things from another side, understand what's different, and yeah, that's probably it from me.
Yeah. And I should probably say my boss, of course, Simon McGinn, and I'd love to go out for dinner with Simon, as I'm sure he would me. But if I was moving away from my boss, I would definitely say, just because I dealt with them for a few years as they were coming through and changing the market, and that's Aston Lark. So Peter Blanc, huge industry figure. He also is good at picking nice restaurants, so I think that would be an absolute bonus to spend an evening with Peter. But in all seriousness, the background to that would be to just pick his brains and the team's brain about where the world is going on the broker side, because we've talked today about the insurer focus, but there's so many things changing on the broker side as well by the day, in terms of their modernization as well. So that's why I'd pick him and some of his senior team.
Well, great answers. I'm sure Peter will be listening to this episode. So Peter, feel free to choose a nice restaurant to invite Jason to, and perhaps Jonathon and I can perhaps join too.
We'll clear our diaries, man. We'll clear our diaries.
Exactly. But Jason, Jonathon, thank you so much for joining me in this episode. I find it fascinating, all the transformation they're driving, especially in a player as large as Allianz, which is obviously more challenging. And I think you are, definitely one of the players in the industry with the clearest vision and moving at real pace. So congratulations for that, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Juan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Juan.